Okay, do me a favor. Look around the room you're sitting in right now. Check the thermostat. It's probably, what, a cozy 20 to 22 degrees Celsius, right? You probably turned on the heat this morning and haven't given it a second thought since. Well, welcome to this explainer, where we're going to dive straight into a time when that kind of effortless comfort was absolutely impossible. We're looking at how ancient humans survived the ultimate test. But what if all that modern heating just disappeared tonight? And I don't mean a chilly draft under the door. I mean imagine being ripped out of your modern comfort zone and dropped directly into the lethal freezing winds of the Ice Age, equipped with only what you have on you right now. The brutal reality is that a modern human left in those harsh conditions without intense preparation and historical knowledge would literally be dead before morning. Section 1. The brutal reality of winter. When we hear the phrase Ice Age, I think a lot of us just picture, some heavy snow and shivering around a tiny campfire. But in places like the ancient Eurasian steppes, winter didn't just make life hard, it aggressively attacked the human body. The cold was a literal physical force. Fingers would lose feeling, breathing the frigid air became painful, and a single bad gust of wind could turn a minor mistake into a fatal disaster. And biologically, we are completely unequipped for extreme cold. We don't have thick fur to protect our skin. We don't have heavy claws to dig warm, protective burrows in the frozen earth. We definitely don't go into hibernation to just sleep through the worst months like other animals. According to the strict rules of nature, we had absolutely no business surviving this. I mean, we sweat easily, we lose body heat incredibly fast, and our infants remain totally helpless for years. So the obvious question is, how in the world did we make it? Well, first, we gotta bust a pretty massive myth right out of the gate. That popular image of the dumb caveman helplessly hiding out in random caves, yeah, that's largely fiction. Why? Because ideal caves, ones that were structurally safe, near water, close to fuel, and along animal migration routes, were incredibly rare. Reality tells a completely different story. Humans survived because they stopped trying to act like helpless animals and started acting like brilliant builders. Which brings us to Section 2, engineering the perfect shelter. Just think about the massive architectural challenge our ancestors faced here. They had to build defenses against lethal cold without a single scrap of modern fiberglass insulation, no glass windows, and zero power tools. Everything had to be engineered from the frozen landscape itself. Their solution was this incredible layered construction that practically mirrors the logic of a modern insulated wall. Let's break it down. Step 1. They intentionally dug out the floor. By going lower into the earth, they basically used the ground as natural insulation against the wind and stabilized the temperature. Step 2. They built a sturdy framework of bone and wood. Step 3. The brilliant layering. They put furs facing inward to trap radiant body heat, packed moss and plant fibers in the middle to absorb moisture, and draped heavy outer skins on the outside to block that brutal wind. Now, if a standard hut sounds impressive, get this. In regions that are today Ukraine and Russia, archaeologists have found literal mammoth bone domes. Just picture this awe-inspiring structure built on a frozen, completely treeless plain. With absolutely no wood available, they used giant, massive mammoth skulls as deep, heavy foundations, and those long, curved tusks to form architectural arches. This wasn't some temporary tent thrown together in a panic. This was monumental engineering that had to be planned months in advance. Because of all this crazy complexity, we actually need to completely redefine what a shelter even was back then. It wasn't just a simple box to hide in from the snow. It was a dynamic, living system. It required precise management of the central fire, complex ventilation, and really strict social organization. The space inside wasn't a free-for-all, The absolute warmest, safest spots closest to that central hearth were strictly reserved for the protection of those who needed it most, the children and the elderly. But here's a deadly problem you probably haven't even considered: the ventilation paradox. See, when humans breathe, cook, and dry wet furs inside a tightly sealed shelter, moisture builds up incredibly fast. In a deep freeze, that trapped moisture turns into frost on the inside walls, which completely destroys the insulation. So our ancestors had to figure out how to vent the smoke and moist air out without losing their precious heat. It's a life or death balancing act. Let in too much fresh air, you freeze. Let in too little, you choke on smoke or freeze from the indoor frost. They mastered this balance through generations of rigorous trial and error. Moving on to Section 3, food and natural freezing. Because, mastering your shelter and surviving a warm night meant absolutely nothing if you just starved to death 3 weeks later. Winter survival was a massive, high-stakes game of logistics and calories. It required incredible efficiency from ancient hunters. When they secured a massive animal like a mammoth or a bison, talk about 100% utility. Literally nothing was wasted. Meat provided vital energy. Fat was pure, essential internal heat. Bones became the structural pillars of their homes. Skins became life-saving clothing. Tendons became the incredibly strong bindings and tools they needed. Animal fat and marrow weren't just food. They were absolute survival treasures that fueled the internal furnace of the human body to fight off the freezing temperatures. And to preserve all of that massive calorie haul, they basically used the earth itself as a giant natural freezer. While we just rely on an appliance plugged into our kitchen wall, they used the permafrost. They dug deep pits into the frozen ground or utilized snowpack to safely store their meat. This required crazy intense forward planning. In the middle of summer, they were already calculating and hunting for the calories they would need for the long, dark winter ahead. One bad calculation, that could cost the group weeks of vital energy. All right, Section 4, the technology of clothing. Because before you can even step outside to build a shelter or hunt a mammoth, your clothing is your very first absolutely crucial personal layer of survival technology. A naked human in the Ice Age was completely defenseless against the cold. And there is a massive difference between loosely draped animal skins and tailored, fitted garments. Just draping a loose fur over your shoulders might help a little, but the freezing air just rushes right in. By inventing tiny, meticulously crafted bone needles, our ancestors were able to sew tightly fitted clothing. This was a real game changer. They turned the fur inward to trap insulating air against the body, stitched it tight to block drafts, and expertly covered extremities like hands, feet, and heads. This tailoring was advanced tech that completely transformed humans into cold-resistant beings. Every single stitch was literally a matter of life and death. Let's look at Section 5, community, fire, and knowledge. You know, the absolute ultimate survival tool they possessed wasn't a physical object. It wasn't a weapon or a structure at all. It was each other. A lone human out in the Ice Age winter had almost zero chance of survival. But a coordinated, highly synchronized group, they could conquer the immense, back-breaking labor required just to stay alive day after day. Look at the intense division of labor required here. It took an entire community working in absolute, perfect harmony. You had people constantly gathering heavy fuel in the snow, others endlessly repairing those vital clothes with bone needles, people preparing dense, caloric food, and those dedicated solely to watching the vulnerable children. And right in the center of it all, managing the fire. Fire was meticulously guarded. When the group moved, the living embers were carried with intense, protective care. Starting a brand new fire in a blizzard was nearly impossible, so the flame was treated and protected as if it were a living, breathing member of the community. And when night finally fell inside those mammoth bone domes, the shelter completely transformed. It became a school, a memory room. Picture this, a winter evening 20,000 years ago. The wind is screaming outside, but inside, the group is huddled close in the orange glow of the hearth. When they told stories, it wasn't just casual entertainment. It was the crucial, life-saving transfer of survival data. How to track a herd, how to stitch a waterproof seam, how to read an incoming storm. This knowledge was carefully, intentionally passed from generation to generation verbally. And finally, Section 6, the legacy of human warmth. So as the Ice Age finally began to retreat, our world dramatically changed. The ice melted, forests expanded, temperatures rose, and eventually agriculture began to spread. As humans settled into permanent villages and warmer climates, those hyper-specific, incredible survival skills of the deep freeze slowly faded away. But we really need to recontextualize our ancestors one last time here. They were brilliant engineers without blueprints, architects without rulers. This completely shatters that primitive grunting caveman myth for sure. They were highly adaptable survivalists who relied entirely on intellect, sharp memory, and unyielding cooperation to conquer an environment that was actively trying to kill them every single day. Which leaves us with this final, kind of provocative thought to close out this explainer. You didn't invent warmth. You inherited it from ancestors who refused to freeze. The next time you walk into a cozy room and adjust your modern thermostat, I guarantee you won't look at it the exact same way again. Every warm room you enter is built on the foundation of their sheer, stubborn refusal to give up. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into human survival, and I'll catch you on the next one.